In this blog, you'll learn and be able to identify all the recurrent events that an organisation would be required to perform under ISO 45001. As an outcome of that, you should be able to ensure those activities are scheduled and actively plan to put your organisation in a great position for your external audit. This model you see here, if you pick up ISO 45001, look through the introduction, they basically have that model of a management system. Slide aside, it's exactly the same model. I should put the numbers on there as under all of ISO's management system standards. Now, the quality one, food safety, etc., etc. The exact answer as to what recurrent events might be generated by your management system, your safety management system, will vary slightly across different organisations. Let's start here under the context of the organisation. The standard talks about we need to identify the context, and particularly those internal and external issues that could affect our safety performance. That's 4.1. 4.2, we do need to identify the needs and expectations of interested parties. So both of those become a recurrent event. They're not something we do once and park it. They're something we need to come back and revisit. Those internal and external issues change, expectations of interested parties change. It is something actually under the management review requirement in section 9. If you look at the inputs to the management review, it mandates that you review those two things during the management review anyway. Okay, I'm going to jump forward to our leadership section in the standard. 5.1.1 identifies a range of accountabilities for top management, looking at opportunities to integrate the safety management system with the strategic direction of the business or into standard business processes where possible. Again, they're not really one-off. They are things where across a year, certainly an external auditor who comes back would expect to see you've taken ongoing action there. So that is something we are going to need to facilitate with our leadership team. Under the leadership requirements, it says we've got to set an OHS policy. It's similar to any of the OHS documentation that we need to create under ISO 45001 or we choose to create to support our safety system. Yes, we need to review that periodically anyway, but certainly if there's been operational or organisational changes so that documentation is no longer reflecting our current practices, well, we absolutely need to update it there. Okay, so that is definitely a recurrent event. Roles, responsibilities, accountabilities. It's a clause under section 5 as well. Again, something should be reviewed periodically and certainly reviewed if there's organisational or operational change. 5.4, consultation and participation. It absolutely triggers a range of recurrent events depending on how your organisation does it. If we're going to consult through things like OHS committees, toolbox meetings, whatever our approach are, we need to plan and schedule those things. At a senior management level too, there needs to be some oversight that senior management are reviewing the effectiveness of those consultation participation mechanisms. So if I move on to the planning part of the standard, 6.1 says we need to identify, then take action on risks and opportunities. Again, that's something that does become a recurrent task under your system. Those risks and opportunities can change. Yes, we progressively take action on and hopefully mitigate those risks and facilitate those opportunities. It's something that the management review process mandates that you revise as well. A really critical one, 6.2, hazards and risks. When we look across our operational processes, our plant equipment, our materials we use to identify a hazard, how people could be injured or how we could create ill health or how people could be harmed. Yes, that absolutely needs to be reviewed, again, quite regularly, but at a certain period, but most definitely if there's, change in our operations and the way we work, well, we're going to need to review it again. Legal and other requirements is something we're required to identify initially under section 6. Of course, those legal requirements and other requirements change from time to time. Government release new laws, modify regulations, things like that. A recurrent event is to come back and review that and make sure we are up to date in identifying legal and other requirements that apply to our organisation. The last part of planning, yes, this is the part of the standard where we set some objectives and supporting actions to achieve our objectives. Again, even the management review process mandates that we review progress against objectives. Even if it didn't, as a management team, at some point we've got to come back and say, well, are those actions allowing us to progress towards our objective, or do we need to look at additional actions to achieve what we want to achieve? Moving on to the support part of the standard, yes, we allocate resources. That's something that management review says you need to revise and review regularly anyway, because the initial kind of resource allocation, dollars, people, time for an effective management system, what's required can change over time. As we grow staff numbers or inherit new sites within our business, whatever the changes might be, well, are the resources still adequate to allow us to achieve the kind of safety performance that we are looking for? Also under section 7, it talks about competence awareness. That's most definitely an area where there's some recurrent events. We don't just do initial awareness sessions. We may need to do refreshers from time to time, particularly for new personnel who join the business. The kind of skill sets, competencies, licenses people need to work safely. Again, we need to make sure that's all current, nothing is expired. So that becomes a recurrent event to review our competencies. Also in section 7, yes, we've already talked about our documentation. It needs to be reviewed periodically or when change occurs. Section 8, looking at our operations. Yes, we need to review processes that support our occupational health and safety management system. The standard says we need to identify control measures for our hazards and risks. We need to think about the hierarchy of control. It's incredibly important to come back from time to time and evaluate whether those control measures are working as effectively as, number one, we'd initially hope that they would when we identify those control measures, and that they're still, in an operational sense, working effectively. They haven't failed in any sort of way. Absolutely critical, fundamental in risk management as well. If a control measure's failed, it's not providing the level of protection we assume it is. I would extend that also to under operations. So standard talks about emergency preparedness and response. So if we have emergency control equipment, that creates recurrent events. It's got to be maintained, it's got to be service tested, checked, perhaps even calibrated periodically as well, so that that equipment is fit for purpose, ready to use in an emergency event. Whether that be fire hoses, alarms, fire extinguishers, just depends on what emergency equipment you have as well. Those last two, your operational control equipment, your emergency equipment, that's where there will be variance between organisations listening in. We need to understand what that is in our business and plan and schedule that kind of maintenance, testing, whatever's required. Additionally, under emergency response, it talks about we need to test our evacuation processes. There's regulatory requirements there as well. It's clearly a recurrent event, as well as our emergency response processes. Moving on to section 9, 9.1, monitoring. Requirements for monitoring. A lot of those things that we've already talked about. The control measures, are they working effectively? Monitoring whether we're complying with our legal and other obligations, things like that. If you look at 9.1, it does itemise some things you must monitor or go out and measure from a safety perspective. So evaluation of compliance actually gets its own clause in there. Yes, that's a recurrent event. We need to come back and evaluate, well, are we actually complying with those legal and other obligations that we identified back here? No surprises here too. Yes, we must plan, schedule periodic internal audits. Under section 10, where we've had incidents reported and we've got corrective action underway to try and address why they've occurred. As an organisation, at a management level, we should be reviewing any trends there, what kind of incidents are we getting, and also the status of the corrective action. So there's nothing that's fallen through the crack and it's just not been actioned. As well as under section 10, review our overall progress on our objectives. So there's two things I'd add to this discussion. One is if you go to our resources page, we have posted a management system calendar with a lot of these recurrent events. You can use that to schedule your events if you want. Another discussion point, and I won't spend too much time on it, is ISO says yes, you must do these things recurrently. It never nominates a specific time frame though. So for management review, how often do we do that, or how frequently? Audits, how often do we review our document? It's really up to your organisation. There's no minimum or maximum kind of time frame identified. It has to be at a reasonable time frame to allow you to achieve the safety performance you're seeking to achieve through your system. In our next blog, we're going to start to have a look at internal auditing, why that's really valuable in your business. If you like this video, then hit the like button below. Why not even share it with your friends? Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Appreciate you listening and keep an eye out for our next video.